You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to the Village of Wappingers Falls meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees for today, Wednesday, December 16th. And we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'm going to do the roll call for John Carge because he's not able to be with us tonight. So I am here. Mayor Alexander is here. Trustee Markajan?
Here.
Trustee Catalano?
Here.
Trustee Nisnik?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Huber?
Here.
Trustee Panessa?
Here.
Trustee Lammers?
Here.
And Attorney Craig Wallace.
Here.
Okay, tonight's meeting has been convened in accordance with the Governor's March 13th, 2020 Executive Order 202.1 as extended, which suspends certain provisions of the Open Meetings Law to allow a municipal board to convene a meeting via video conferencing. In accordance with the executive order, the public has been provided with the ability to view and participate in tonight's meeting by computer, smartphone, or telephone, and to view the meeting on the usual cable television channels as it's been recorded, as well as participate through YouTube. The recording of the meeting will be posted to the village website, and a written transcript of the meeting will be prepared and provided. There has been a roll call of the board, and there is a quorum present for this meeting. And I have also confirmed earlier with the clerk that this meeting has been duly noticed. We have fulfilled our legal notice requirements by posting a copy of the notice of the meeting on the webpage and on the village's bulletin boards. We have emailed a copy of the notice to the media, and we have confirmation that the legal notices for the public hearings have been properly published. So tonight, I'm going to ask if we could suspend the rules and go out of order. Is that okay with the board? Could I get a motion?
I'll make it.
And a second?
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Markajan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I have with us tonight a group called Business Advisors, and Walter Goldman is the principal of that group. And I have done some work with them in the past, and so I just wanted to introduce him to the board and ask if he could address the board as it relates to municipal business. Walter?
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, for having me. I appreciate it and welcome everyone. My name is Walter Goldman. I'm one of the principals of an organization called Business Expense Advisors. What our organization does mostly for not-for-profit municipalities and schools is lower costs without changing service levels on operating expenses on a contingency basis. So that was a big mouthful. What does all that mean? So what we do, and we are doing it for a lot of the municipalities in Rockland and Westchester, what we do is we go in and look at recurring operating expenses, landline phones, wireless, Verizon Wireless, whatever. And things that are recurring expenses, merchant credit card services, water, waste management, bottled water, subscription software contracts, everything that you get billed for monthly and the same amount monthly. So I wouldn't be looking at WB Mason. I'm not looking at things like that. I'm looking at things that are recurring operating expenses. That doesn't include staffing or rent. So it includes utilities. I'm just reading from my own list, cleaning services, equipment leases, and I lower the cost of those without changing the service levels. So payroll services and things like that, that's what we do. And we take a percentage of savings. So a lot of organizations and municipalities are interested in that type of savings because all it is, it's kind of a no-lose situation. If I don't find anything, I don't get paid. Obviously, we document all savings. If you're unhappy with a vendor, obviously we're interested in knowing that. But for the most part, all I'm going to do is actually take a vendor list, go through the vendor list, lower costs, document the savings, and work on a contingency basis. Any questions on the service or any questions in general? I'm happy to field them. It's not really sophisticated as much as it's just a cost-saving program.
So the village has had a consultant like this before, and I would just like to vouch for Walter's ability to keep in communication with his client, and I've been doing some work with him in the city right now as a municipality, and so there's definitely lots of communication with lots of backup, and I think the kinds of problems that we've had in the past with this kind of a service are not the kinds of problems that you would expect to see with this particular vendor. So I would encourage the finance committee, and the finance committee, I believe, is Jennifer, Mary, and Kevin, Brian. So it's Brian for you, Walter. It's Brian Lammers, Jennifer Nisnik, and Mary Panessa, and the treasurer, Jessica McMahon, is here as well. And I would encourage them to get in touch with you, and maybe, Walter, you could reach out to Jessica, who's on the email that we first set up.
Sure.
An introduction, and just see if there's a way to set up a further meeting about this.
So if I could elaborate, because I didn't get any questions, but I go to department by department, department heads. So I would go to IT, police, the comptroller's office, and I would look at budget line items, which is how we start. And we look at, again, just recurring expenses, maintenance agreement, payroll services, and we are going to actually, off a vendor list, we are going to actually call them and look to lower the costs to make sure you're not overpaying for these services, which oftentimes you do. Something as simple as elevator maintenance. We are amazing how we find savings there. We find savings in utilities, in uniforms, in payroll services. So things that you use, and we know you use, And we're not suggesting you're not happy with them. We're expecting you to be happy with them. You're paying them on a consistent basis. All we're going to do is make sure you're not overpaying for those services. With our background, we do know what things should cost. So we do know what elevator service, maintenance service should cost. We do know what payroll services should cost. And what they very quietly do, and this is not a surprise, they tend to just, over the years you use them, tend to just marginally increase those services, the cost for those services. And it really becomes no one's job to just keep track of how these increases come, except what we do is we call them up and we explain to them, and they usually know of us, and they also kind of know that they're overcharging over time. And so the goal, again, is not to, I get questions like, are you mean to the vendors? We're not mean. We're actually very nice people. We just want to make sure that we're not overpaying for services that we've been using for a long time. We usually have been paying our bills very regularly on time, and we just want to make sure that we're not overpaying. And if we're being billed for features that we do not use, so the agreement that I have, and thank you, Matt, for saying that. So City of Peekskill may have features they're not using. All we're looking to do, we would address those features and say, why are we using those features? Maybe we don't need them. And then we will look to lower them. But the main goal of the service is to keep everything the same vendors, same service, lower cost. What we often find as we do our work, that there's features you're paying for that you are not using, or there's landlines that just go nowhere that you're paying for. So there's a lot of waste. And when someone jumps on our service, engages us, we kind of look to make sure we're not paying for things that we're not using. So that just gives you a flavor for that. And more often than not, we find that there's a lot of things we seem to be paying for that we're no longer using or we haven't used in a while. So I don't know if there's questions, but a lot of times there's wireless services and we find out there's no activity on the wireless service because that person has resigned or been terminated, and we're still paying a monthly fee for that device and it has no activity. So those are the things we'll uncover as well.
Mm-hmm. And your payment, Walter, is a percentage of whatever the savings is?
Yeah, so you would get an agreement. These are things that have to get, it's a process for us. We don't usually get an approval for some couple of months, but it's for 50% of the savings that we document for 24 months. So just as a case in point, if all of a sudden there's a device that you shouldn't be paying for because you're not using it, and that device you're being billed $25 a month for, if we identified it and documented for you, you would pay us $12.50 for the savings, and you obviously would save $25, and of course half of that is $12.50. That's how we make our living, and that's how we do it. So there is no charge to you except when there's documented savings. Good question. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, are there any other questions for Walter?
We'll talk about it at our next finance meeting.
All right, very good. And that's before the January meeting? Is that the same day as the January meeting?
We've been having them a little earlier. I'm not quite sure if Jessica's on the line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it should be the same day.
And we do a lot of work with the municipalities, again, not-for-profits, and school boards tend to be our largest clients for obvious reasons. And they tend to find some real value, and they also need to get back to their, either it's a board of trustees or whatever, because we want to make sure we're not overpaying for services. So it's really a good opportunity for everyone to kind of, with a clean slate, we're vendor neutral. We surely have vendors we like, but we surely don't recommend vendors. We are vendor neutral. We're just making sure you're not overpaying for the services that you're using. So that's the purpose of the expense reduction program.
You said you collect the information for over, say, a 12-month period, and you use the $25 and the $12 savings. Now
I'm
that,
sorry. So what we do is if we find savings, and I just gave an example, if we find savings of $25, we get half of that for 24 months. So in a case of a wireless device that you're paying for and not using, we would take the half of the savings, which we would document for, which is, again, most of it's Verizon Wireless or T-Mobile. Around here, we don't use too much AT&T, and of course, Sprint is now part of T-Mobile. But in a wireless situation, we would make sure you're getting the best plan, first of all, and whatever savings came from that, we would take half of for 24 months and document it. So you would know exactly the savings. After 24 months, we're done. Whatever savings after that, of course, would be 100% yours. So that's how that service works. So we're not partners forever. We're just partners in the savings for 24 months.
so if you discovered something that we paid $25 for that wasn't beneficial to us and we stopped paying that $25, we, just to make it simple, we would be paying you $12 for 24 months.
Well, it's $12.50, but yes.
Yes,
Yes.
you got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. Any other questions that I could possibly field?
I'm sorry, forgive me. What's the name of your company again?
Sure, and you can look us up. And of course, we're all referenceable. And obviously, Matt was nice enough to introduce us. So we've been working with Matt, but we do it with a lot of municipalities, and we're happy to give you references. But the name of the firm is Business Expense Advisors. Advisors is ORS, not ERS, whatever. But that's because just if you want to look us up under ORS, Business Expense Advisors. And we do this for a living. It's just an expense reduction, contingency based.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Walter.
Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And what I will do is follow up with the names you gave me. And if there's an interest, obviously I would send an agreement, field any other questions. I obviously have a lot of literature. We have websites, but if anyone has questions after that, but I will follow up as you just recommended. And I want to thank everyone here for their time. So thank you again.
So yeah, their next meeting will be the second Wednesday in January. So,
and I did see the invitation, so I do have their names, and I will just follow up and give them some marketing collateral, answer just kind of a broad general idea of what we do. Again, I'll document it and kind of get a feel for the interest level. And if there's an interest level, I would send an agreement, so as I did with you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you again. Appreciate it. Have a nice evening. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Right. Good night, Walter.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next up is, we'll go back to the regular schedule. John Zarowski is with us as our village engineer, and he's going to talk to us about our projects that we have that we're working on. Go ahead, John.
Good evening, everybody. Let's just start off right off the bat. The boathouse is moving along very, very well. They've got most of the major items done. They were able to pave last week, toward the end of the week, which was the milestone. Getting that done this year is really big. We're just waiting for the like the handrail and the lighting. The longer lead time items are pretty much all that's left on that project. Franny Reese is complete pending the final payment, which of course we're going to have 3% retainage on that for 2 years. The TAP project, again, also pretty much it's complete, pending the closeout paperwork with the DOT and final payment on that one as well. And then other projects. So contract 5 is into the agencies for review. It went to the EFC and the health department at State and Dutchess County and the county and the DOT for review. Part of that project, the bulk of that project, again, is the 12-inch water line on Losey Road connecting the village water system to the town of Wapager's water system. We did include the section of the sewer that wasn't able to be completed last year because of the buried leaking underground storage tanks that created environmental cleanup. So that has been included in this project. We've been talking to the EFC about that. We might be able to get some funding for that based on some emails I see going back and forth about unused funds from contract 4 that might be available. I'll keep you posted on that. Bidding is targeted for early next year. And we do need to schedule the public hearing for this, for the to meet the EFC requirements. So that's an action you'll need to do tonight, Matt. You got that? Okay. Going forward, at the water board meeting on was it Monday last week, or no, it was Monday? I don't even know. The 7th. So it was last week. The morning that the world is blurring anymore with the holiday season. The water board authorized us to take the water filter plant drawings from the concept level that we had done last year and progress them to 100% so that they're basically contract ready. So when the funding is in place, we can immediately go ahead and get bidding going on that for the green sand filters to improve the water quality in the village. It will take care of the magnesium and iron that keeps creating the water problem, the water complaints. Let's see, and then they also authorized the windlass water tank replacement design. The developer of Buckingham Project Properties has offered the village $375,000 toward replacing windlass tank. The tank will be a little higher. It'll increase pressures and fire flows in the village. We're going to take that only to 30% design until the funding is actually in place. They've met the planning board requirements and have met and have done the contingencies to get final approval, and one of them being the payment of the $375,000. So we're going to take that to about a 30% level as well. The grease trap project, that is moving forward. It should be, well, we were hoping to get it in this year. I believe that's what we're trying for still. The committee met on the 28th of August, and it's pretty much ready to be submitted to the village and then to EFC. Bain Park survey and master plan, the survey that has been transmitted to the village. We had a remote kickoff meeting on the 20th of October, and then another design kickoff meeting on November 6th. We are going to continue working on this, where we're putting together the master plan, the site design for the playground equipment, and then also doing the long form EAF to meet seeker requirements. The brownfield assessment, we're just working out the last few details with the EPA to move forward with phase 2 at the bleachery. And once that's done, of course, now that it's winter and there's snow on the ground, I would probably not rush that until everything's in place. The water infrastructure study, nothing new has happened on that. It's been provided to the town and the village. We haven't received any comments. And then Haji Terrace, the same thing was provided. I don't know if we need to do anything more on that. I might just take that off the list. Anybody have any questions?
So, John, how much longer for the paving at the boathouse?
The paving is done.
So
they finished paving last week. So now the only thing left at the boathouse is, I think, the handrail and the actual lights fixtures, which are a long lead item. The bases are in, the wiring is in, everything's ready to go. We just need the poles to put up.
Okay.
So Woodland did a wonderful job. I'm really pleased we got them. They pushed it through. Omar was great to work with, I got to tell you. Couldn't have asked for a better contractor.
Okay.
They look really good down there.
Yeah. He was very responsive. I mean, we had that little hiccup in the sidewalk last week, and he, I guess it was the weekend before, Matt, you a picture of it. He cut it out over the weekend and replaced it so that they could get the paving done last week. So he was very responsive. So like I said, we couldn't.
Highway supers said it was a good job.
Yeah.
There's just one little puddle down there, but it's not too bad though, in the blacktop. So it really came out nice.
Yeah. Excellent. Good to hear.
Good. So so why don't we, are there any questions for John? If there's no other questions, could we set a date for the public meeting for the contract 5 design? John, are you thinking January?
I would think, yeah, January at this point because of the noticing. I mean, but it can go, as long as it's done before it goes out to bid. So January would be better, but if we can't get January, then early February. Because I'm anticipating we're going to be putting this out to bid in late February, early March, if everything goes well.
Does this have to be noticed for a public hearing?
Yes, this would be a public hearing.
You want to do it at the workshop?
Yeah,
Or is that too late?
that's January 27th, John.
Okay.
Actually,
Is
that
that-
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Is that? So Todd could just advertise that as something, as a public hearing for that night separately.
Okay.
And you could start it at 5 and have the regular meeting after the 5 o'clock public hearing. I would, so I would also like to have a grand opening for the boathouse. And I know that it's not completely ready, but I would like to ask if we could unveil and light the artwork that the Hudson River Foundation paid for, which was about 3 or 4 years ago now. It's installed in the window, and the meaning of it is to be lit up so that when people enter the village from that southern entrance, especially from the train station, that they see the artwork there. And I was wondering if we might be able to do that as a virtual event on Sunday, December 20th. You guys okay if I do that?
What time?
I'm open to any time that day.
Yeah, I'm good.
Are you good for that?
Yeah. This Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday. So is it better to do late afternoon or is it better to do before noon?
No
Me
matter to me.
personally, I'll be working till at least 1 o'clock.
So 1 o'clock is good for you, Jen?
Yeah, anytime after 1. I work until 1 on Sunday.
Mary, are you around? Are you working?
I'm checking right now.
I'm working in the afternoon. I'm working 2 to 6 on Sunday.
Are you working far away, Brian?
I'm working down in Fishkill.
In Peekskill, you said?
Fishkill.
Fishkill. So could we do 1 o'clock? Then could we target 1 o'clock?
We could target 1 o'clock would probably work for me. Yeah.
Do you need
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to. I'm doing 12 to 10.
12 to 10 on Sunday?
A lot to be fixed, I guess. And Christians went through it pretty
Or
well.
we could do Saturday morning if that's better, the day before.
I'm working
I'll call you back.
because I got an
I'm almost done.
Okay, so do you want me to push out or do you want to just go ahead and do it?
I would say do it. I don't know. That's just
I mean, if it
myself.
helps, I could probably try to go in a little early and get out by 12, if that helps, Mary.
Would you come, Mary, if we could do it?
I could do 12 on Sunday.
Okay, so why don't we do noon on Sunday? And
Okay.
that gets Kevin back in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. How about you, Kristen? Are you around?
Yeah, I can do noon on Sunday.
Okay. I'll go back to those other things. And let's see. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing waiver of penalty for late water and sewer payments due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And Craig, you want to talk to us?
I'm gonna take my leave, please. Good night, everyone. Good night.
Oh, good night, John.
Night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
All right. So this was a continuation from last week. We tabled discussion to this week. I think I spoke to Jen Niznik, Trustee Niznik, before the meeting and explained what I'm about to explain to the rest of the trustees about this particular resolution. It is based upon a new law that the governor just signed into law that allows anybody to apply for a payment plan, a deferred payment plan, to stop the clock on any late fees that might be imposed by the water department. Now, it is incumbent upon somebody to seek a deferred payment plan in order to stop the clock, and they would also have to qualify for, financially, based upon a COVID-related financial hardship. So it's just not across the board, and it has to be applied for. But once that is done, it would stop the clock for anybody who's seeking to enter into a deferred payment plan with the village for the payment of their water bill. Now, this does not apply to sewer service. It only applies to water. So I just wanted to be clear on that. I had disseminated earlier today a notice that should go out to our users, but that is really, it's more relevant for termination purposes, and we really rarely imposed that termination in the past, so I don't know if it would even be relevant in this particular case. But I can tell you that the end date right now for this particular law that the governor signed into law was the end of March of 2021, but it could be extended by executive order, and it looks like that will probably be the case here because, as you know, we're possibly heading for another shutdown, and all COVID-related EOs will probably be extended indefinitely.
So this doesn't
Any
apply
questions?
to your everyday, someone who's just late. They have to come in and apply for it specifically. So business as usual if they're just late and they don't come in.
Yes, but we as the village have to put everybody on notice in writing with the bill. And I don't know if that was done the last time with the last bill, but according to John Karj, he said that a notice was sent out, but he's not here in order to verify tonight.
So I can tell you what
if that's the case.
They sent out, am I on mute? No. So what they sent out was what we sent out was a frequently asked questions about the notice about this executive order. So we could get that for you and you could look at it. I think it answers everything about this, but and you could determine if we need to put something else out.
I want to just reiterate that the law, it's kind of confusing, and there has been a lot of NICOM guidance on this, but we can still, we as a village can still charge late fees relating to, the water service bill. So that is not going to be affected. All it does is it allows for a deferred payment plan by a user. So the clock, if you qualify, if a user qualifies for the deferred payment plan, it stops the clock on the late fees for that particular person. Okay, but it can still be collected later on. Get it?
Yep.
So the resolution is actually, that's before you, is I'm going to recommend that you pass that, of course, because it is patterned on state law, but it is going to be subject to a user who has to come forward and ask for the deferred plan and qualify, for the deferred plan for COVID-related reasons. And I will give Marie guidance on how to determine whether or not somebody qualifies.
So in other words, yeah, you have to show financial proof, or you got to show some proof. You can't just say, "Hey,
yeah,
I want to get it."
I mean, it's not so detailed where we're going to go into somebody's personal, financials, asking for tax returns and bank statements. It's not going to happen. Yeah, I think it's pretty much an attestation clause, and it's not indefinite, by the way. Right. So right now it's set to expire in March of next year, but it looks like it will probably be extended on a 30-day rolling 30-day basis.
Okay, is there any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, can we get a resolution?
Motion
for a resolution that says, whereas the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic poses a threat to the health and welfare of the residents and visitors of New York in Dutchess County and the village of Wappingers Falls, and whereas on March 7th, Governor Cuomo issued an executive order declaring a state of emergency, which has been extended, whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has caused economic upheaval, which has made it difficult for residents and businesses in the village to pay their financial obligations, including water and sewer bills, whereas Chapter 148.18 of the Code of the Village assesses a late penalty of 5% on all water and sewer that have been in arrears for more than 30 days. Now, it would be resolved, if we pass it, that the village hereby authorizes the suspension of the late penalty assessment imposed by Chapter 148.18 during the pending statewide state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic and for a period of 30 days thereafter. And is there a motion?
Mayor, I would also add in there that it would be for those people who qualified for a deferred payment plan.
And shouldn't it just say water and not water and sewer?
Right. You said it didn't include sewer, right? Yeah. It says sewer more than once.
It should say water only. So
okay, so
we could modify the language that includes sewer and add that the village board authorizes suspension of the late penalty assessment for those individuals who are eligible under a deferred payment plan.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second by Trustee Huber. I'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Huber.
Aye.
Trustee Markajon.
Aye.
Trustee Niznik.
Aye.
Trustee Panessa.
Aye.
Trustee Catalano.
Aye.
Trustee Lammers.
Aye.
And I will say aye. Okay, and I'm going to go back, and with the projects, I should have had Corey, who's here to talk about.
Mayor, can you just make sure that the modifications are made to the resolution and given to the village clerk as modified? The motion passed as modified.
As modified, yes. And so it says, authorizes the suspension of the late penalty assessment for those individuals eligible under
A deferred payment plan. And you would delete the word sewer.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll provide a clean copy of the resolution tomorrow, weather permitting.
Okay. So Corey, are you available? Can you talk to us about grant news?
Yeah. So as usual, a lot of stuff I talk about, John Zarowski usually talks about. TAP, the EPA Brownfield, the boathouse. He gave updates on those. I have the same update, obviously, because that's where we're at with those projects. But going through other things. So last time I spoke, we were about to apply for 2 different CDBG grants. That's community development block grants. One was the normal one that they do every year, and the other one was a COVID one that's new. And we actually discussed the regular CDBG, and we agreed to do it on Bain Park, the next phase of Bain Park, because we actually have a CDBG currently with Bain, and that went completely towards the playground and that equipment and installation. This next one we used to apply for the greater area, the field, and possibly the tree planting and all that. So are people confused? Oh, I thought Mary was talking, sorry. So we applied for that in November, and we're waiting to hear back from that. It's a $100,000 grant. That's the limit. The COVID one we used to apply along with Greystone for a community center, a wellness center, I suppose is the term, for St. Mary's. We want to kind of do something with that school ever since it shut down as a school. There's a food pantry in there, and there's still religion classes, but for the most part, the buildings and the classrooms and the gym and cafeteria is not used. So we're trying to find some purpose for that then can benefit the community. And we feel a wellness center, a family wellness center, is something that could work, especially for kids who, due to a lot of remote learning, may not have the proper technology at home, or enough technology if you have multiple kids at home to be able to do schoolwork and get tutors and all that. So that's along the lines of the COVID CDBG grant that we used to apply for at St. Mary's. And a third grant, actually, we just applied for this past week, and it is part of the electric vehicle charging stations. Me and Tom Morris, he's really the one who's been spearheading it. And him and I have been working with Central Hudson, as well as various EV charging station companies, to get the best price to install certain stations. 2 in Mill Street parking lot, possibly 2 in Franny Reese. And then there's possibly 2 going on at Patriots Plaza with Tinkleman. So we just applied for that grant this week. We hope they give you like $4,000 per charging station. So we hope to hear back from them within the month. That's sort of a rolling grant. And the last thing I would just bring up is we've begun our pilot projects for LWRP, which is for Wappinger Creek and mainly for us, Wappinger Lake. The one was I brushed up on them last time a little bit, but one was biochar at Green Pond, which is by Dutchess Airport. We were going to put biochar at the bottom of a dam and see if the water coming over the dam gets filtered out before it enters the main stream of the creek. The other one is by Twin Lakes, up at Twin Lakes, which is at the headwater of Wappinger Creek. We hope that, again, filtering it out there right before it enters the main stream of Wappinger Creek will help us down here. And we also are installing a weir up there, which is sort of a larger filtration apparatus itself, and it's also supposed to help restore the water level to that lake, which again, we hope will then help restore some of the water levels in the creek. And then the last one is a StreamGo water treatment facility. It's a temporary one at the moment, obviously. It's been retrofitted onto Wood Hills condominiums, water filtration system. And we're going to test that over a number of days to see how well that benefits at all before that water is, again, emptied into the creek. So for the most part, that's what's been going on in the past 2 or so weeks with me. And if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Good job.
Hey, Corey, a question on the charging stations. What typically is the cost of?
So since we've been looking, it's typically around 2,000 to 3,000, and then of course if you want, warranties and maintenance and all that, there's a lot to be discussed. But for the most part, it's around there. But what's nice about this grant is it's willing to give you $4,000 per port, and usually one charging station has 2 ports to where 2 cars can. So you essentially almost get $8,000 for the station, and installing a station is well under that. So the whole goal of this, and this is Tom Morris, when he came to me, the main goal of this is to be cost neutral to the village, if anything beneficial, because then we can charge people who use it. So if we do go through with this, it's not going to cost the village any money.
So did you talk about the match, the meeting we had with the state about the match?
No, but back to the LWRP for the water, Matt and I just had a meeting yesterday with the Department of State. The StreamGo project, which comes out to about $107,000. Once again, that is not village money. That is a donation from them. They're trying to get down here as well and show their product, that we've been bringing different people from municipalities and different politicians to look at that. So they're sort of doing that for us. And in return, we talk to the state and we're allowed to use that $107,000 for match on our part, even though it technically wasn't village money. So that's really good for us because we needed to get some match funding, and it's also not technically costing our taxpayers any money. So I think it's really good.
Very good. And that's just a projected number. We think that number might be a little bit more than that too. So that was very good work, Corey, and all the people, and John Zarowski too.
Yes.
And so we've got, so the water, does anybody have any questions for Corey before we move on?
Corey, just do we know from maybe another municipality how much maintenance they need? What would it cost to maintenance one of those throughout a year?
The charging station?
Yes.
So what's really awesome is, again, charging stations are something that's pretty new. I mean, they're not crazy new, but as far as they're getting much more popular. And so most companies that supply them, you will usually install it or maintenance it for very low fees. It's usually about $700 a year for like the top maintenance. And Central Hudson as well also is trying to get this more and more integrated into municipalities down here. And so they actually will come anything if they need, if you need to connect it to the street, the grid, they're willing to do that for free. So maintenance typically at most $700 a year, but we hope that over time, obviously, the more they're used, that would just really cancel itself out.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So before we go on, we do have, I did prepare something for the trustees just because this is, for me, the last meeting that I'll have, and what I wanted to share with you guys is a capital infrastructure plan that we have talked about over the many years. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen, and this has been going on since 2007, really, and it talks about the history of this plan. So just tell me when can you guys see it? So this capital infrastructure plan is put together. It's been a running tally. You can see it's an updated version of the village's capital infrastructure plan from 2010, 15, and 18. And it talks about what we've accomplished since 2007. It gives most of the funding agencies that we've used. It explains what all those letters mean when we say them. And the first part talks about the general overall approach, who had been involved with it, and what we're doing in terms of water, sewer, water quality, facilities, and other hard infrastructure. So it talks about what we've currently been doing in 2018 and 2019, and it shows you if I can get this smaller, shows you the difference between where we were 7 years ago and where we are now, or excuse me, 19 years ago and where we are now. So in this example, you can see the top map is the sewer lines that were in poor condition in 2001 were in red, and then in the 2020 map below, it shows you that most everything is green, which is reconstructed or TV'd and relined. It gives you the list of what has been improved or installed in the last 14 years, in the years before that, and then in bold in each section it talks about the kinds of projects that have been discussed over the last many years and what's still left to do. So in this example, it's got the sewer projects that are still outstanding. This one talks about Tri-Muni, and the total number you see there is to be shared amongst 3 municipalities, that $10 million number. The same thing goes for water. In the water example, red is really bad and green is very good. So you can see we've made some great changes as far as that goes. Lists out all the areas that were improved in the last 14 years, and then the areas that were approved prior to those 14 years. And then again in bold talks about the projects that you need for water, filtration system, interconnection with the town of Wappinger, in an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Poughkeepsie, the windlass water tank, Givens Water Loop, Imperial Boulevard, and Route 9 water mains. It has a discussion of them, talks about the efforts made for water quality, and same thing in bold gives you the things that we should keep working on regarding water quality. And then it shows you the sidewalks and roads And so this is just road condition here. And to the left was the 2001 road condition, and to the right is the 2020 road condition for the village. Here is a sidewalk inventory, which just shows you the red areas in 2020 that should need to be worked on, and the green areas that have most recently been worked on, and then the yellow and sort of green yellow area, which is good or fair. Talks about facilities and parks. And in the parks section, there's still parks that need to be worked on. And for that, that is the Bain Park and Falls View development of the vision that we had in August. Some in a parkland dedication. This one even talks about a concept of a shared recreation field with the town of Wappinger, or it could be the town of Poughkeepsie, or it could be the school district as well. Talks about parking areas that are have been added, and gives recommendations for what to do to move forward. Gives you what's happened with the fire department and the police, and economic development, what we've done in the past, and then lays out the recommendations on what to work on for the future in bold here, which I'm making bold. So I'm gonna ask that this be put into the minutes, and the board could vote on this in the future, or they could just leave it in the minutes, or you could you could keep it and change the priorities to be what you want. So I thought this is it's a good way to have a list of what needs to be done with already thought out and thought out price estimates. Some of them are very good. Some of them are, if they're further out, they're not as strong as they could be. So you could spend some more time working on those estimates. So I just wanted to leave you guys with this and have this put in the minutes as something, and I'll send this out to the board members after this meeting. Are there any questions about that?
No, that's good.
Could be a helpful tool.
Okay. So let's get back to the agenda, and I see that the next thing that we have to talk about is the resolution for the Village Planning Board to be lead agency for 2695 West Main Street. Am I in the right place on the agenda?
Yeah. Yes, you are.
Okay, so there's a developer who has an application in front of the Village Planning Board for the rehab of a mixed-use building located at 2695 West Main. And we usually allow the Planning Board to be the lead agent for that regarding seeker. So I'd like to ask for a motion that would consent to the Village of Wappingers Falls Planning Board to serve as lead agency for the project known as 2695 West Main Street Mixed Use Building. And it would say, whereas Richard Hollister currently has an application in front of the village for the rehab of a mixed use building located at 2695 West Main. And whereas the Planning Board served the Village Board a notice of intent to act as lead agent for the project and has requested the Village Board's consent. And it would resolve that the village hereby consents to the Planning Board acting as lead agency for the project known as 2695 West Main. And could we get a motion?
I'll make it.
So I take Kristen as the motion, and the second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Trustee Lammers, and I'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Huber?
Aye.
Trustee Markajon,
Aye.
Trustee Niznik,
Aye.
Trustee Panessa,
Aye.
Trustee Catalano,
Aye.
Trustee Lammers,
Aye.
and I will vote aye. And the next item on the agenda is there's I'm going to ask the Personnel Committee to talk about this next item.
Talking about.
The
Part-time treasurer.
Okay, so the other ones we're not doing, the resolutions?
Those are
Or is
for
that an
executive session.
Okay. So we interviewed for part-time treasurer, and we would like to hire Brianna Crane for the part-time treasurer. So effective the 28th.
The 28th
Yes.
of December? Okay.
Yeah.
So could we, is there any discussion from the board?
I
Okay.
interviewed her, and she seems more than qualified. Yeah.
Very good. So could we get a motion
I'll make that motion.
in a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Trustee Lammers. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next item on the agenda, Trustee Catalano, do you want to talk about the 2004 Polaris?
The last meeting, let me pull up the agenda, it's on the screen. We had approved the purchase of a plow for the four-wheeler that's sort of meant to be a shared vehicle with the police and highway, I believe. John did answer our questions about any additional cost of insurance with anticipated use. That was a no. There is not a mandatory course required to operate the vehicle, although the village would be responsible, for who they allow in each department to operate that. And that answers the third question. So our motion from the last meeting stands as far as going ahead with fitting it with a plow and to be used for the sidewalks on West Main for ease of clearing of the snow. So I think the motion stands. I don't think we need to do anything further, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that you're just clarifying a prior action. There were
Right,
some
we're waiting on-
questions that remained.
Right.
So if everybody, would this change anybody's vote, this information?
Yep.
It was a contingent on all of them being essentially no additional cost, and that's what it came back as.
Okay, so you're satisfied with the contingencies and the prior vote would stand, prior action of the board?
Yes.
Okay, and could we, I would like to add to the action before this past one, that the hire be subject to Labor Council and County Civil Service review.
Also, Matt, we have the full-time highway laborer as well that we didn't go over.
Okay, but I would, before we get there, could we add to the motion for the assistant treasurer, the statement that the hire is subject to Labor Council and County Civil Service review? So how would we do that, Craig? Do we need to rescind the motion and remake it?
No, you can amend the motion to include the subject contingency, and then again, would that language change anybody's vote?
No.
Would everybody agree to if there's a motion to amend the prior resolution or motion of the board, then everybody should adopt it or not? I think you should have a roll call vote, Mayor, just to keep the
Okay. So, we'll
record.
do, roll call vote. Trustee Huber,
Aye.
trustee Markajon,
Aye.
trustee Nesnick,
Aye.
trustee Panessa,
Aye.
trustee Catalano,
Aye.
trustee Lammers.
Aye.
Okay, and you can put me down as an aye as well, yes. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion approval to purchase a new copier for the building department. Did we get a number for that? Did we get an amount that is going to cost?
We did
John,
last month.
Go ahead.
I said we did last time, but I forget the numbers. I think he was just checking to make sure we had the monies in that budget item or budget line for that copier, and they do.
And they do?
Yeah,
Okay, so could we get a motion?
I'll make it.
I'll second it.
Seconded by trustee Panessa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then I do think we have some items to discuss in executive session. Do you have some for us, Craig?
Yes, involving personnel. So yes, I'll be present.
Okay,
But we would have to make a vote to go into executive session.
yep. All right, Walter, do you have anything to say in this part of the meeting?
No, I'm all good. Do you need me in the executive session?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay. So
Okay.
I'll just leave totally, or do you need me back after the meeting?
You could, no, I don't think we need you after the meeting either.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
and
you, Tom.
so we're asking for a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of speaking about personnel. Is there any litigation to discuss or potential litigation?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And any bargaining agreement issues?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any
Bargaining agreement.
other reasons to go into executive session from the board? Okay, so if there's, so I think we don't need Jessica, Corey. Oh, Cindy, do you have anything that you want to say at this meeting before we go?
No, Matt, I was just on in case there was a question about any of the projects that we were doing with parks and stuff. That's all.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Cindy? Okay, so if there's no questions for Cindy, could we get that motion? And it would not include Corey, Jessica, Cindy, or Walter.
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
seconded by trustee Lammers. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Complete. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we can go into executive session then.
Any opposed though? Was there any opposition to that vote?
I just got a question
Okay.
about, was there a highway personnel person on the agenda for tonight?
There's no
Yeah.
highway personnel person on the agenda, and I think I would like to discuss that in executive.
Well, there is one on the agenda I have, but I it's okay if we want to discuss it in executive, but there is one on my agenda.
Not on the last agenda, but Mayor, I would just let Rich Kalen know that we are going to be coming back after executive session for to report on some
I told him
resolution.
that before the meeting, so.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just make
Is
sure.
he gonna
Rich, are you
do a
here?
breakout room for us?
The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return. The board has entered executive session. Please stand by. The meeting will resume when they return.
Okay, so the village board is back from executive session. Could we have a motion to come out of executive session?
I'll make that motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
I'll make it.
Seconded by trustee Catalano. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and so the board has decided to take action on 2 items. There are 2 resolutions for the bargaining agreements, their memorandum of agreements. And the first one, I don't have in front of me.
Right.
So the first one, let's say, is resolution number 472020 of 2020, 47-2020 of 2020, resolution approving memorandum of agreement with PBA. The following resolution, if approved, states, whereas the village and the PBA are parties to a collective bargaining agreement, and whereas the parties have reopened their 2018-2023 CBA by amending Article 23 to add provisions regarding police department FOIL requests, and whereas the MOA provides, which is the memorandum of agreement, provides that it is subject to ratification, approval by the village board and ratification by the PBA membership, and whereas it is recommended that the proposed MOA be ratified and approved by the village board. This would resolve that the Board of Trustees hereby ratifies and approves an MOA with the PBA modifying the 2018-2023 CBA by amending Article 23 to add provisions regarding police department FOIL requests. And it would further resolve that the village mayor or deputy mayor and the Board of Trustees are hereby authorized and directed to execute the MOA in the form annexed hereto. Craig, are you still with us?
I am now.
Could you, is there anything you want to add to that?
I just got here. Tell me which resolution we're on.
I just read 47-2020 of 2020.
That the badge? Or the
No,
FOIL?
it's the FOIL.
Okay. No, nothing for me to add. Other than that, the PBA adopted this version of the MOA at last night's meeting. So
Okay.
it is incumbent upon us to ratify it in order for it to become an amendment.
Okay, so could we get a motion?
I'll make it.
I'll second.
So we had a motion from trustee Lammers and a second by trustee Catalano. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Trustee Huber.
Aye.
Trustee Markojan.
Aye.
Trustee Niznik.
Aye.
Trustee Panessa.
Aye.
Trustee Catalano.
Aye.
Trustee Lammers.
Aye.
Okay, the next agreement is 49-2020 of 2020. And it, if approved, would be a resolution which would authorize a memorandum of agreement with Wappingers Falls PBA, the Police Benevolent Association, regarding retirement shields and identification cards. This following resolution would resolve that the village board would ratify a memorandum of agreement with the PBA resolving a grievance and modifying the 2018-2023 collective bargaining agreement to include a new provision on retirement shields and identification cards. It would further resolve that the village would hereby authorize the mayor or deputy mayor to sign the memorandum of agreement on the village's behalf, as well as sign any other documentation as may be necessary to effectuate the purpose and intent of this resolution, and fully settle and resolve the aforementioned grievance. And is there anything we need to add to that, Craig?
Nothing.
Okay, and could we get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by trustee Lammers. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Trustee Huber?
Aye.
Trustee Markajon?
Aye.
Trustee Niznik?
Aye.
Trustee Panessa?
Aye.
Trustee Catalano?
Aye.
Trustee Lammers?
Aye.
Okay, and that resolves that resolution. And at this time, there is no other business for the board to discuss. And I would like to ask for a resolution to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make it.
And a second.
Second.
So was that second from trustee Markajon?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and this concludes the meeting for tonight.